Well, I got a nice box in the mail today. Minnesota trapline. It is Christmas in August. Got a big box of basically just a dozen traps and most of the stuff to do it. Howard wanted me to get him a dozen traps set up to trap his piece of property in Alabama, and figured we'd go ahead and shoot a little video on what I do, or what we do, to get traps ready from the box, from the manufacturer, to go and set in the ground and catch coyotes. Alright, probably the most asked question we get is, what kind of trap do you like for coyotes? And I always go back to the Bridger number 3. You always want to check your state regulations on your jaw size, because this is kind of a big trap, but every state that I trap in, this is legally allowed. It's square jawed, it's laminated. This is actually from Minnesota Trap Supply. It's their number 3 fully modified. It's 4-coiled, base plated, and laminated. And it's ready to go out of the box, other than a few just very minute details, and that's what we're going to go through today. This is a fresh trap. It's still got oil on it. If I take my gloves off, you can rub on it and you can see the black oil come off on your fingers. So we're going to take care of that. But before we do anything, I want to get these traps to where they are ready to go. Adjusted, modified, the whole 9 yards. I want them anchors on, wrapped up in a tight package. I can throw them in the water, we boil them, we wax them, and we go catch coyotes. So this is, like I said, the raw trap. First thing we do is I order these. These are MB chain stakes. They're non-finned. They're $30 a dozen from Minnesota Trap Supply. And what we do whenever we get them is we automatically cut like 4 to 6 links off. I've never had a problem with a coyote pulling this staking system up, and the way they send them, for my liking, is just a little bit too long. So I go ahead and cut 4 to 6 links off. Doesn't take very long. The trap already comes with 2 swivels. We buy these heavy 6-gauge rivets. It's a J-hook from Minnesota Trap Supply. You can buy them by the dozen, or you can buy them by the 100. I think they're $1.60 a dozen or something. They're fairly inexpensive. But this is what's going to attach your anchors to your traps. Slide it through there, and it's pretty simple. It's just putting it together. I mean, I know this is all kind of elementary stuff, but we've never done a video start to finish on setting a trap up. So there's your anchor. Forgot to mention, this is a very handy tool when you go to put traps together. It's called a J-hook pliers. Pretty simple. It makes it a lot easier to squeeze those J-hooks down. You can do those with pliers, but it makes it a lot easier with that tool. Fairly inexpensive, but anyway, there we go. Anchor's attached. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to put my tags on them, and I always trap tag it twice. That way, if you get an aggressive coyote and he chews it off, but I just wrap it around those swivels. Pretty simple. I do one at the bottom and one at the top. Do that, and then a pair of pliers and just crimp them. Just crimp it on there. And I've got traps that are 5 or 6 years old that I've never had a problem with those coming off. So that's done. Next thing we want to do, take one of these handy dandy little tools. It's $1.85 when you go to order your traps. It's a coil spring tool. You can use it to put, if you're going to modify a trap or put a new spring pin on it, use that tool. But this is what I use it for. On these Bridger number 3s, those springs stick straight out when you get them in, and I really like to bend those down because it gives that trap feet. I always call it the 4 corners of the 4 feet of the trap. 1, 2, 3, and these are 4. And if you bend those down, it kind of gives it its feet. And whenever you bed it, it sits there and it doesn't rock. So this is pretty quick and easy too. And you can do this with a pair of pliers, or you can do it with one of these right here. This is 5/16. We use this to adjust our pan tension later on, and I'll show you that here in a minute. But this also slides right over nut driver, and you can bend it down if you don't have a spring pin tool. But anyway, bend them at a 45-degree angle. That's pretty simple. Next step is to get your pan tension right. And when they come from the factory, they're always going to be loose like that. This is pretty simple too. 5/16 nut driver and a flat screwdriver. And just tighten them up. And then you'll start to feel what you got. Ooh, that's pretty darn close right out the gate. We're gonna go a little bit tighter. I do like to go about 4 pounds or maybe just a tick over 4 pounds before I wax them, because after you go ahead and throw them in the wax pot, they're gonna loosen up just a little, just because of the lubrication that the wax gives them. So that's pretty good. All right, so the next thing we need to do is night latch this. You can see where this dog comes in, latches on the pan. We wanna make a little bit of a notch there. It's a little 8mm file. You can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy this. And it's pretty simple. You lay it in there flat and just do about 3 or 4 strokes, and that's all it takes. And it makes a little bitty notch in there. And when you set this trap, you can hear that pan click into that notch. Just like that. And the next thing you want to pay attention to is how level your pan is. And this one's a little bit crooked too, out of the factory, which isn't a big deal. I can grab a pair of pliers while this thing is set and level that pan up. And just kind of pull it sideways. Okay, it's pretty level. And one thing that I like to do, I like to have that pan slightly pointing down, and you can see it. It's pointing down, and this jaw sits up just a little bit. And a lot of guys don't like that, but I don't mind it, because to me, it makes that trap, it's closer to close before the trap even fires. So that coyote's foot's gonna be in there deep before that trap fires. And it also allows my pan cover to lay underneath that loose jaw. So that trap needs no more adjusting. You can see how that trap, or the pan is slightly pointing down and going underneath this loose jaw. So it's ready to go. A lot of guys don't like to run it with their pans pointing down like that, but look at the amount of room that I have underneath of there for that trap to still fire. And by night latching that, there is like I said, it's like a 1/32, maybe smaller, just a notch. And watch, there's no travel. When something hits that pan, it fires. That's why it's very important to go ahead and get these ready to go before I boil them, before I wax them. Everything is set. So this trap's, it's ready to be boiled. I really like to wrap these up just for organization. I don't like to have all this stuff tangled up, so I'll wrap my chain around the jaws and then stick it through the corner of them right there. So you can twist that trap around, and now we don't have to worry about tangling up when we throw them in the box. So this one's ready for the water. We're gonna boil, we're gonna get all of this oil off of them, and then we'll take them to the wax. I'm just using straight water today, and this will start to roll and boil. Some guys will actually go ahead and put some Dawn dish soap or some muriatic acid in there to try to rust them. We're not gonna try to rust them. I've got to where, if I get a new set of traps, I'll boil them, get the oil off of them, throw some wax on them, we'll go catch coyotes. Over time, they're gonna rust. I've actually got one right here. This trap's probably 2 or 3 years old, and they've got just some surface rust on them. And then, now we can go ahead and dye it. It'll go ahead and take a dye. Like I said, we could run some muriatic acid in there to go ahead and rust those traps, and I've done that in the past, but there's really no purpose in it. The dye in them makes them look pretty. They're gonna be shiny, but they're gonna be underground. Coyotes can't see them when they're underground. So, this trap right now could take some dye, or I could just go ahead and throw some new wax on it and go catch coyotes. It's not rocket science, but we're gonna boil these traps. This will start to roll and boil, and you'll actually see a film of oil start to form on the top of this. We would normally take that outside and pour the water out because all the oil has floated to the top. I'm gonna take this paper towel, and it'll all stick to that paper towel. You can kind of see the discoloration on there. And it doesn't seem like much, but it doesn't take much of that oil to stick to those traps to screw up the whole process of getting them ready to go. And you can, instead of pouring it out, you can take this, run it along the top, and you kind of see all that film that's on top of there disappear. It all sticks to that paper towel. You can really see it on that one. It's all oil and dirt. Okay, we've got our pot of wax ready to go. And this is it's just a big Dutch oven, and that's actually 30 pounds of wax in there. And you don't have to have a pot this big. You know, if you're only doing a dozen traps, I know a lot of guys that they get by with 4 or 5 pounds of wax, and they can do one trap at a time. But with this big of a pot, I can do 4 or 5 traps at once. And whenever you're doing 100 traps at a time, this just makes the process go a lot easier. So you layer them in there. And those traps need about 30 or 45 seconds. In the summertime, it's going to be a little bit quicker because your ambient temperature outside is already, 30 or 40 degrees cooler or warmer than what it would be in the wintertime when we're normally doing these. We can worm them in there, and you can see some of those are still sticking out of the top of that wax. Really, all you got to do is just take your pliers and move some up on it. And as that trap and that metal of that trap heats up, that wax will disperse itself. This one here I might have to just flip over a little bit, get it nice and wet. But this is probably the most important aspect of trap preparation in my mind. Whenever I first started trapping and people talked about waxing traps, I was thinking car wax. You're gonna go out there and polish them out, but that's, that couldn't be farther from the truth. Basically, you're just melting wax in a big pot, putting your traps in it long enough for the metal to heat up to the same temperature as the wax. So when you pull these out of here, and this one here is probably ready. That's the first one I put in there. When you pull them out, they just look like you dunked them in a pot of water. And I'll hold them over the top of that wax pot, let it drip, make sure you got a good grip on your pliers, and I'll just shake it off. And you always want to make sure that this bullet for your anchor is pointing down. The open side is pointing down because you don't want that to stay full of wax. Then your driver sticks on it. But this is basically the simplest form of it. I mean, it's not rocket science. None of the trap preparation is rocket science. It's minute details that we learn over time to make it work better, to make the trap work better, and to make it more efficient. So basically all that this wax is doing is it's encapsulating the trap, it's trapping any kind of scent of the metal inside of it, and it's making that trap slick, and it makes it work a little bit faster. It also, these traps are going to be in the ground for 10 to 14 days. So it keeps it from rusting, as it works as a protectant. There's a million different ways that we could prepare these traps, and there's a million different combinations and types of traps, but this is one that I like. This is the system that I like. And we could have spent the time to rust them, or we actually could have even painted them. Guys are even painting them orange and pink and whatever color. It's not an exact science. It's basically all what you like to do. And this is kind of the old school way of doing it. And I like doing this. It's something to get in the shop and get your friends involved in it, and maybe drink a cold beverage and have a little cookout and get stuff ready for the fall. We're actually going to start trapping here, and probably in the next 10 days I've got some summer coyote removal to take care of before deer season kicks in. But here we go. Howard, you've got a beautiful, brand new, fresh dozen traps ready to go.